Thank you, April.
We're going to break for just a moment. After that, music and conversation with Frontier Ruckus.
At first, like, oh, he's playing a saw. That's weird and wacky. But then they're like, oh my God, he's really playing that thing like a Stradivarius almost. It's like, it's so amazing.
Thank you, Matt.
We'll be right back. This is Stateside. I'm April Baer. When you're feeling emotionally frozen this month, when it's time to reckon with the endless grays of Michigan winter, because they're not going anywhere, and neither are your misgivings about true love and success and renewal, when you're just not sure if your best days are in front of you or whether you kind of spaced on them, it's probably time to put on that new record by Frontier Ruckus. The band is delivering a new release on the Northline this Friday, February 16th. Let's listen to the title track.
Syrup and saccharin don't really factor in when I'm with Catherine. On the Northline, we're 15 years after the high school braces lift. On the Northline, the tectonic molars and incisors start to shift. On the Northline, the municipal golf course is strewn in October leaves.
We invited Southeast Michigan's bards of car culture and suburban anxiety to tell us all. Frontier Ruckus is Matthew Millia, Davy Jones, and Zachary Nichols. Band, welcome back to Stateside.
Thank you. Always so good to be back here.
So the title track suggests, and this will shock people who know you, Matthew, you're thinking about mortality lately?
Yeah, you know, when you reach the ripe age of your late 30s. Also, I had major spine surgery last year, so
What?
I don't know, like all these things just kind of, you know, when it rains, it pours. But the Frontier Ruckus catalog was always like ensconced in childhood nostalgia, and the older I've gotten, just the less rose-tinted that nostalgia has been, and the more forward-facing, and you know, you see the timeline of your life and what's going on. So this record, I mean, we've been taking our sweet time with it. Our last record came out in 2017. We're just not in a big hurry these days anymore, so to put our record is really a special moment for us.
What's that about? Why? I mean, this is your multiple albums in now. Not in a hurry for what? Is it just because the goalposts are so completely different now than they were when you started playing together?
So releasing a record where it used to be just kind of like a diaristic checkpoint of where I am, like personally in my life with the songs, looking back, it's also like a really interesting barometer of where the music industry was with each release, because it is unrecognizably changed, especially post-pandemic. But like looking back at every record, it like came out in a different music industry climate. Our first record in 2008 was right before the banjo boom, as we call it. The times were good. So like
Davey's like, man, I was there.
Yeah, you had to be there.
We were there before it all. The four on the floor stomping and the suspenders and vests.
Davey's been playing banjo since he was 12. So
Pre-Lumineers, pre-everything.
Mumford and Sons.
Yeah,
but we did benefit from that boom. Like our second record, Dead Malls and Nightfalls, came out in 2010, and we were playing Bonnaroo. And though we had like 20,000 times the lyrical density, and kind of we were writing about very specific esoteric Michigan references. So we were able to ride that wave for a bit, but we couldn't really take it to Red Rocks.
How did the out-of-town crowds, I mean, a lot of people will recognize in your songs like literal places that they know and probably cars that they or their family members have driven. How did the out-of-town audiences react to all those references?
So this brings me to my mantra as a songwriter, which is the universal resides within the particular. It's seen in the best literature and filmmaking. Like the more specific you can be, somehow people out there can do their own like interior translation, and it actually makes the universal amplified within those specifics. So like the first time we played in London, we weren't expecting anyone to know us or care about these really Michigan-centric songs. And there were people in the front row singing the words like louder than I could. Like they probably had a few Guinnesses in them. But I asked one guy after him, like, why do you care about these? He's like, you might as well have been talking about my own small town.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Over there.
It's just, there's this translation. It's all the same thing. The USA and the UK music dialectic has just been a ping pong game for decades
so
now.
Long now. Yeah. I have to say on the car references point, I loved so much that there was a song on this record called Mercury Sable. My grandfather had one of the third generation models when the designers were going like crazy ultra aerodynamic, and all of a sudden there were no edges or like boxy corners. We were so enchanted with it. We used to call it the bubble car. Why did a sable stick in your head?
So I'm speaking chiefly of the 90s variety of Mercury Sable. And that brings us to an interesting tension that's throughout this record on the Northline. I'd say 3/4 of the songs were written before I met my now wife and love of my life, Lauren, and mother of my first child who's about to turn 1. So those songs are like when I was still in my classic frontier ruckus, lonesomeness, angst. Then I met her, and there's songs like Mercury Sable. Mercury Sable to me is one of my favorite songs I've ever written. It's the purest love song I've ever written. It was the car that Lauren drove when we met.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was a clunker. It was so loud and so dented. She lived in southwest Detroit and I lived in Corktown, and I could hear the car passing under the tunnel of the Michigan Central train station from like a quarter mile away, and my heart would start racing because we had just started dating, and I was so excited that she was coming over, and I could hear that Mercury Sable rumbling in the distance, and I wrote the song about it.
I can't believe I'm asking you guys mid-career band questions, but here we are. I think a lot of people may not realize that one of the real challenges of being in a group over time is just that thing where like people's lives change and they get married, or they're, maybe they think they might want to be involved in a scene in another city. What's the secret to Frontier Ruckus being able to keep it together this long? I'm especially curious to hear what Zach and Davey would say about this.
It's a very good question. I think that at our core, the secret to that for us has always just been that we've been friends first, and just the core of our identity.
I mean, I'd almost say brothers. I'm an only child, and the closest thing that I've ever had to brothers, and that bond is just it comes before the music, but it makes the music so much more special.
Zach?
Yeah, same. Only children together.
Zach's also an only child.
Being alone in the world together. Boy, that really rings with the lyrics, too. Speaking of lyrics, I read something recently that was making a case about male vulnerability in songwriting. This particular critic is kind of obsessed with Robert Smith and really thinks that The Cure made it possible for guys at the turn of the late 20th century to talk about feelings and stuff. Now, I'm not saying that my brain went straight to Frontier Ruckus when he posed this, but I am curious what songwriters you can think of who helped you see that, vulnerability was going to be a thing in the music that you make. Matt, since you're the key songwriter, this is for you, but really I'll take any and all thoughts on this subject.
I mean, I think even my favorite classic songwriters like Bob Dylan, Neil Young, Paul Simon all showed vulnerability in their own ways, even though there's definitely a lot of machismo that sometimes they dress it with.
Yeah, with Dylan, it's like, here's some vulnerability. Now let me stab you in the ribs.
Yeah.
I feel like Paul Simon has that like little friend on your shoulder kind of vulnerability.
Definitely.
Like, he admits to having a wall around him that
you can't even see.
That you can't even see, right? Yeah, exactly. Who else?
But obviously, I mean, you get your Morrisseys and your Robert Smiths that kind of made a brand out of it or marketed that side. And once they broke that door open, I mean, it was off to the races for songwriters like me. That's kind of been my brand too, right? Every song I write is a diary entry where I'm using it for catharsis and therapeutic purposes. I'm just family, love. Like, I was always kind of aware of the fragile aspect of those things. So I was writing these songs in a kind of desperate attempt to preserve them in my life.
If you're just joining us, my guest today is Frontier Ruckus. They have a new record on the Northline that's publishing on February 16th, and lots of dates coming up, probably at a venue near you. We're going to hear another song from the record now. This is Clarkston Pasture.
I'd rather wear another layer. I'd rather sit in my big coat in my cold living room, cultivate a sore throat, and be the only person who's breathing in the furnace air. I think it's safe to assume I'd be the only person there. His company is not near, and nothing's gonna bring it back. Not another cold beer, not another night black. The blackness all around your young Milky Way, swirling in the white sound. Wasn't it just yesterday? Your warm breath in my ear, when you're the only person who, when everyone could disappear, I'd only want to think of you. Clarkston pasture, driving faster, out past the last bachelor pad my uncle had. You called me the master of petty sad bastardism. That day all in all was not so bad. That day all in all was not so bad. I'm wondering what you see, I'm wondering what you know. I'm wondering if you peep me in the Christmas tree glow. The family is dwindling, and all your old furniture, gather it as kindling. Try to raise the temperature in your hometown starlight. Freezing in a parking lot, cheering on a bar fight, but you know where it's always hot. Clarkston pasture, driving faster, out past the last bachelor pad my uncle had. You called me the master of petty sad bastardism. That day all in all was not so bad. That day all in all was not so bad. That day all in all was not so bad. That day all in all was not so bad. That day all in all was not so bad. That day all in all was not so bad. Clarkston.
Great work, Zach. I love any song that will bring a melodica in. That was lovely. There's something so mournful about that sound.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. I love melodica.
So our whole career, Zach has been known as a guy that plays a myriad of weird instruments, but never as a novelty. He has the most genius ear. He can play the musical saw better than anyone I've ever heard. So people are at first like, oh, he's playing a saw. That's weird and wacky. But then they're like, oh, my God, he's really playing that thing like Stradivarius almost. It's like, it's so amazing.
Thank you, Matt.
Come to the gig, people.
Yeah.
Are you gonna bust it out?
Of course.
Which shows? Okay. While we're on the subject of Clarkston pasture, Matt, there's a lyric in there. You called me the master of petty sad bastardism.
We could say that on the radio.
I want to know who hurt you. Who did that?
Myself. Every time I say you in a song, it's pretty much me talking to myself. So that's my vulnerability in these songs. It's me like getting real with myself and being a little hard on myself and calling myself out.
Yeah. It's very Midwestern male to be extra hard on yourself too. So
oh yeah,
way to carry
that's not
this
going
together.
anywhere.
We talked a little bit about the songwriters that Matt is sort of in conversation with. I was curious, Davey and Zach, are there any instrumentalists who you feel like are the bookends for what you play?
Well, for me, there's a growing up, I was always really into bluegrass and really into just Earl Scruggs as a traditional basis for the instrument. But I've also always been very obsessed with people who sort of stretch the instrument, like Bela Fleck and Noam Pikelny. I've always been very into Scott Joplin as a composer, and that's something that I spend a lot of time arranging.
Tell them about the album you're working on.
I'm working on a record of
tell.
Scott Joplin pieces arranged for banjo with different instrumentation for each piece. So string quartets and brass bands and stuff like that.
That sounds like material that would be incredibly fun to play live.
It is. It's very intricate and very difficult, but very interesting and fun, and it can be really jaunty, but also kind of secretly sad at the same time because that music was very melancholy.
I've always been an admirer of like what the bandmates in like Belle and Sebastian and Neutral Milk Hotel would come up with, like Scotty Spillane's horn arrangements. I've always taken inspiration from those kind of arrangements, knowing like we can do it in this folk act and have a lot of cool instrumental parts.
I don't know what we're calling this decade and the one before, but I do feel like we're in a mini golden age of bigger bands. Belle and Sebastian, I think of Typhoon. It's very hard for bands of that size to tour because nobody's getting paid that much to begin with. But good grief, if you've got a horn section, that's crazy.
That's why there's 3 of us before you now.
Yeah, there it is.
I think to sustain a band like that, you have to be zealots.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a maturity of process to the 3 of you playing together? Maybe things that you used to do when you were working out a song that you don't do anymore, or things that you didn't do when you started that you definitely do now when you're putting something together?
There's definitely just a telepathy now. Like, so much less needs to be said for us to get the end result we're after. It's just...
And we also know how to each individually play less to make the song more.
Ooh, you better tell me what that means.
Well, I feel like when we were younger, we would always all try to play everything we could and be the most impressive that we could at every moment. And I think as you get older, you learn that that's not what's important. The song itself is what's important, and elevating the song in the right moments, and interplaying with someone else and understanding how to elevate, all of the individual instruments. And so there's a maturity there, whereas when you're younger, you just want to be impressive and
precocious,
and cool, and yeah, exactly.
And do the jams.
Going back to your earlier question, how have we stuck it out or arrived at a 6th record together? It's because these guys always serve the song. It's such like a generosity on their part to like serve my songs, and it's something I really, really take to heart.
It wasn't always the case that I did such a decent job at it. There was a time when I would try and write the coolest counter melody over the chords that Matt wrote and be like, well, that should work. and it's, it worked as much as it did. But now I am better at trying to... I feel like maybe Matt's also better at leaving a little bit of space. And now
I've just gotten lazier and don't want to write as many verses.
Well, good. So then it gives a chance to have a little bit of call and answer.
Well, I've never thought you've overplayed those counter melodies. Sometimes there'll be a Zach part in a song that I don't even hear my voice anymore. I just tune out and listen to what these guys are doing.
Aw, shucks.
Frontier Ruckus is Zachary Nichols, Stevie Jones, and Matthew Milia. The new record On the Northline is released February 16th. You can find them on the 17th at the Loving Touch in Ferndale. Traverse City, trust me, these guys are right up your alley. Find them at the Alluvion on February 24th. And in Ann Arbor, you can hear them at the Arc on April 13th. Check the websites for more dates throughout the spring and summer. Guys, thank you so much for being here, and thanks for the record. It's lovely.
Our pleasure.
Thank you so much.
That's Stateside for today. I'm April Baer. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Rotting inheritance, plotting some errands with whatever your parents left.